Well, Azim, thanks for joining me on the floor at TCT 2025.
It's an absolute pleasure. It's good to be down in San Francisco again, and what a great start to this meeting.
Man, I tell you, the floor, I don't know if Juan and Marty put us in a tighter spot or there's just more people here
Yeah,
this year.
yeah. I was kind of blown away, like Innovation Day yesterday. I walked into the room and like I couldn't find a seat. Right? It was packed during the Shark Tank competition, but it just shows, I think, the excitement that's happening right now about innovation again. It feels like it's back, and also it feels like we're finally back from that whole COVID dull where everything slowed down. So to see so many people, everybody's so excited, it's great.
Yeah, and we're starting to see the financing slowly return back. I know in our business, we've seen August, September really start to ramp up. Some big deals are happening.
Yeah.
Financing's happening even outside of the cardiology category.
Really? Okay, and I hope we see, I think the thing that's been missing in the last couple of years for me has been the strategics. I haven't seen that growth and that investment, in startups and in new technologies we saw in years past. It's starting to happen though, it's starting to change. Some of the recent acquisitions Boston did and J&J, and I hope that just continues to happen because that's what leads to growth in this field, right? And
That was some of the conversations yesterday too. The strategics are there, but they're coming in way later.
Yeah.
And that leaves you still in that A-B round chasm that really where it's needed more than the post.
Yeah, I agree. The burden of proof you need now to get acquired has really changed. But I think it shouldn't stop us though, because I think there's such great technologies out there and innovative new ways of looking at old problems or problems we've had. Right.
Yeah, and you're involved with a lot of devices like that, and that lends us into Tioga,
Yeah.
right? So you can look at the landscape and do we need another mitral valve?
Do we? Yeah, that's a great question, right? Because, we all remember, I have a slide, which you should see sometimes, and I put up with all the mitral devices that are actually being used right now, right, in patients, and it's huge, okay? And I'm in multiple clinical studies right now with mitral valves. And I can tell you, Joe, after doing this for years, we still haven't figured it out. And that's the bottom line, right? We still haven't found a valve that can address all the limitations. So we're trying to figure out, will we need multiple valves? But for those of us who are clinicians trying to find solutions for our patients, it's very frustrating. When you have to send 10 patients to a company to get one patient approved for their clinical study, that's frustrating. That's very frustrating, right? And I think that's where I kind of see Tioga hopefully fitting in, right? I know, I can't go through screening 10 patients to get one patient help. And I think Tioga, the concept we hope to do with Tioga is we can get rid of some of those exclusions. Will we ever have a technology where we can accept 80, 90% of cases? No. But if we have a technology where even 40% of cases or half the cases are being accepted and can be treated, that'll be huge because I don't have that right now with any of the existing technologies.
What are some of the characteristics of the Tioga system that have it become more inclusive, easier to use, and more friendly in regards to the overall workflow?
Right. So, when I think about like the concept of Tioga from the beginning, we kind of said we have to address some of the issues we were seeing with current mitral technologies. And what are those issues, right? They were the fact that the sheaths we were using were so huge. We were sticking these big catheters, bigger than my thumb, initially into people's hearts, and then trying to get it up their veins and make a hole across their septum. So we needed to get the French size below 30, okay? We needed to have the ability to include more patients, particularly for the fact that a lot of patients get excluded from because of left ventricular outflow tract obstruction. So the new valve pushes the native mitral valve leaflet away and closes blood flow coming from the heart. We needed to address that. We needed to address the issue that you have to have multiple sizes. There was until recently a company who was like building the valve per patient. Think about the commercial viability of that, right? And then we also needed a technology that would be easier to do because mitral, no matter how you slice it, cut it, is one of the hardest valves to treat, whether that's surgically or with a transcatheter space. So that was like the whole idea with Tioga, right? And so I think we've accomplished a lot of those. So it's 28 French, and the way we got it below 30 was, instead of making it a one-step procedure, we broke up two parts of it. So instead of making a valve that would have to be big and have anchors on it and would have to be oversized to the annulus, we made a smaller valve and we made an anchor. And that's what Tioga did. We split the two apart. So first you go in with this anchor that goes and encircles the cords, pulls the cords together and the anterior mitral valve leaflet, and then you deploy into that a dedicated mitral valve. So I'm using my words very carefully here because I want to differentiate also how Tioga differentiates from other technologies that are trying to do the same thing, which is two steps, right? There's at least 4 technologies right now, including Tioga, that are trying to put an anchor and then a valve in the anchor. Some of those, to get the anchor around, they're coming through the aortic valve. That's kind of now you're adding another device in via the femoral artery. Others are putting valves in that were actually not created for the mitral. They were aortic valves, and now we're sticking it in the mitral, right? So with Tioga, we have a dedicated technology that's all transeptal, and a valve that has a brim and was made so it would anchor and seal in the mitral. And I think that makes it unique. I think the fact that we're pulling the anterior mitral valve leaflet towards the center makes it unique. But there's something else that actually I didn't realize myself as we were doing all the preclinical work on this, is that every other company comes down into the ventricle and tries to stay on the outside of these cords. We actually go down the middle, and then from the middle, open up the anchor and try and circle. And what's been surprising is how easy that is to do. So in the first cases, we've done now 8 cases in our OUS first in human. It's become very reproducible and safe with a very new technology.
And what happens typically in those mitral, even tricuspid play, you've got to learn a brand new procedure nearly all the time, and it requires a very high skill level many times.
Exactly. And I think that's the concern with all these TMVR technologies, right? With all these mitral technologies. If you think, the first mitral clip was done in 2003, okay? And we're over 20 years now, 23 years since the first device. It took, almost 20 years to get all the indications. But even now, that requires a different skill set, right? There are like 850 aortic centers, TAVR centers in the US, but only 400 and odd mitral centers because the skill set's different. And even that procedure still has variability in it. But at least it's created a basis for physicians to say, and for imaging specialists to say, this is how you do a mitral procedure. So what we wanted to do as much as possible with Tioga is use that skill set. You say, okay, you know how to do a mitral clip. Can we take some of those skills and use them and make you use a system in a similar way to implant this valve? And that's what we're trying to do with the delivery system, with the technique of how you encircle.
And you brought up something interesting, right? So part of the challenge with mitral, especially in the US, has been driving enrollment in clinical trials.
Yeah.
Right? First of all, because of the gold standard established already as mitral clip, as you pointed out. Back in the early days, I know you were part of this, most of your clinicals took place in Italy and Germany, but after EU MDR came in and a lot of that, the clinicals tried to come to the US, that kind of slowed development for mitral companies, and now they've gone back outside the US as of late.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting change in the ecosystem to watch all of this and be a part of it. And it's I got to say, MDR really slowed everything down in Europe. Though I got to thank MDR because I'm now a New Yorker thanks to MDR. I get to live in New York because I had to run away from Italy because I realized that I wasn't going to be doing anything innovative anymore. And EFS has been great. And let me, I think what the FDA and people like, Dr. Leon and Dr. Mack have been able to do with creating EFS and allowing us to evaluate US created innovation in the United States and allow US patients to have early access to innovation has been incredible, all right? But it's still very expensive doing EFS. It still takes time. The burden of sometimes proof and preclinical studies that you have to do is exhaustive and takes a number of years. So to accelerate that, what we've done is try to see, can we start a little earlier, learning some of those lessons that you're only ever going to learn when you go to patients. Because you can do this stuff as many times as you want on a pig or sheep. And then you go to a patient and you go like, oh, wow, this didn't happen before and now it's happening. So it's allowed us to really accelerate that development phase of translating from preclinical into patients, so that when we come to EFS, we just have learned some of the early lessons that we can then use in the EFS to accelerate enrollment, get your 15, 30 patients in EFS enrolled quickly, safely, and with great outcomes. So what we've been doing is, one of the places a lot of this has been happening has been in Georgia, the country of Georgia, not Georgia the state. And it's been incredible working with the physicians there. They're highly skilled, very driven. The patients don't have many options, right, for mitral devices. They usually open heart surgery, so it's really felt like we're helping patients often who can't, or too high risk for surgery. And what I've been blown away with has been the care of these patients, right? So we often, in the mitral space, we often talk about goal-directed medical therapy. These pillars of drugs you have to be on. And I can tell you right now that in the United States, not every patient's on that, because it's expensive, it's difficult. Every patient I've treated in Georgia is like on every drug. They get everything. They're on Entresto, SGLT2 inhibitors. They get treated so well, and the medical therapy has been so good, which has resulted in why we've had great outcomes going there.
And that's critical, because as the funding environment becomes tighter and tighter, if you can start reducing that burn, you can greatly reduce timelines from maybe 12 months to 6 months with certain activities. That becomes critically important, getting that patient the product.
Absolutely, especially in the, in the space we're living in. So, so far with Tioga, we've done 8 cases. We've learned a huge amount. I've been surprised how quick the learning curve has been. So initially the cases were done by me and Sushil Kodali, and then into already case 4 or 5, we started training new physicians to be able to have a larger team of trained physicians. And so I've been surprised how quick the learning curve is. I think it's a very teachable, reproducible device. But we also, I think, need to start looking into the future, right? The mitral space, I think, the fact that we haven't solved this yet, despite we've been doing TMVR for a number of years, means that there are other pieces to this that are missing. You can have a great technology, but how are we going to democratize this technology? How are we going to get, 300 centers in the US to be doing this, right? So a lot of the current work we're doing is trying to figure that out, is trying to see, can we leverage a lot of the AI and imaging work we're doing with other technologies such as LASA, where we, using AI to get better imaging, using AI and imaging to be able to guide the procedure better, so that you don't need that world-class imager to be able to do the procedure. You can do it with a normal imaging person who may not have had the benefit of 1,000 cases, but has the benefit of 20 or 30 cases, can suddenly, we can narrow that differential. Because one of the biggest challenges for me doing procedures is not my technical skills, just. It's also my ability to see what I'm doing and having an imaging person in the room who can help me do it. And I'm lucky, I have one of the best in the world working with me, a guy called Edwin Ho. But how do I take his knowledge, Becky Hunn's knowledge, all these people we know were amazing, and use that knowledge to get everybody else who's down here, maybe not to that, but maybe we can get them into the middle.
Sure, pull that curve up for sure. And you bring up a really interesting point. I'm glad you went there. So we've got the imaging of, let's just use LASA as a platform, because Pablo's doing there, and that insight you give the interventionalist. And then you start to look at these endoluminal robots, like we've got with Capstan and Maggie putting on, right? Yeah. So now you all of a sudden are taking, you can make the product, but now it's down to the skill. And if, to your point, you can bring that level up, you've just moved the mean up dramatically through better visualization and also robotics that can take the learnings of thousands of
operators.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Yeah. And again, I think the robotics, I've seen a whole lot of companies trying to do robotics. Suddenly, something comes in vogue, right? And everybody's excited, and I'm seeing, companies coming out of China, Germany, all trying to robotically control a mitral clip, for example. And that's okay. okay? But unless the robotics can leverage the imaging and
That's right.
AI and can integrate the two,
Sure.
I'm not so sure it's going to be that useful. Because it makes me think then of, we had a technology to do stents and PCI, right? With robotics. It's gone.
Gone,
Right?
gone. And you can learn lessons from other categories. So if you look at the soft tissue robotic world,
Yep.
every single surgeon will tell you, if you can give me elite visualization with an average robot, I'll take that over an elite robot and average visualization. Because what we're doing now is we're making the seeable, and the advisement and the decision making becomes much better.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree. And I think, to me, for these structural procedures, and this is from someone I have to admit, I've been a little resistant to robotics because I go like, I can do this so quickly. I can do this
Oh,
quicker
you
than any
can.
robot.
You
Exactly.
can.
So I have to then force myself to take a step back occasionally, right, and say, there are all these other people out there, or all my colleagues. How do I get them to be able to do this safely for patients? Because in the end, it's not about whether I can do it, whether these top procedures can do it, and only our patients get to benefit. All patients have to benefit. And the only way we do that is to be able to democratize this and get everybody being able to do these complex procedures safely and in a shorter amount of time.
Agreed. Well, Azim, as always, you broaden my aperture on this market, and your energy is just palpable.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Joe. Always great talking to you. Thanks
you,
so
my
much, my friend. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm Joe Mullings from the floor of TCT 2025 San Francisco. Be well.